You're listening to the Served Up Show, a podcast that features inspiring beverage professionals and topic experts that share their passions through meaningful content. Your hostesses, Bridget Albert, is best known as the Market Fresh Mixologist, an industry mentor with over 25 years of experience. And I'm Julie Milroy, best known for my passion for leading change and helping others grow in their careers. Grab a cocktail and sit back. Let's learn how we can make a positive impact in our industry.
Hey y'all, it's Bridget here. Julie and I had the opportunity to chat with Kimberley Spence, the Southern Glazer's Wine and Spirits VP of Development and Marketing. Kimberley reflects on the importance of representation and mentorship, emphasizing her commitment to empowering others. Kimberley shares her experience as a Black woman in the industry and candidly discusses the biases that she has faced and how they have shaped her resilience and drive. The conversation also explores her innovative approaches to marketing and development, showcasing how her background informs her strategies. So sit back, relax, grab yourself your favorite cocktail, and enjoy the show. Hey, Kimberley. Welcome to Served Up. It is so great to have you with us today.
Hi, Julie. Hi, Bridget. It's amazing to be able to have an opportunity to sit at the table with you ladies.
It sure is just a pleasure and a treat to have you on Served Up. And I'd love to kick us off with a quick question because you have this lovely accent. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about where you're originally from and what brought you into beverage?
Sure. I was born and raised in the beautiful island of Jamaica. So that's where my accent is from. I've been living in this country for over 20 years. I don't hear an accent, but everyone else does.
I'm sure your family doesn't. They're probably like, you lost your accent.
I think I've always spoken this way. Yes, I've been here. We're living in the U.S., like I said, over 20 years. What brought me here was the desire to attend the what is now called the Chaplain School of Hospitality Management at Florida International University. So just taking it a step back further, before I got into the beverage management space, which was completely new to me, when I left college in Jamaica, I left college at a very early age. My mom had to actually fight for me to get accepted into college because I'd passed all my exams, I'd qualified, but they told me I was too young because I was 15 years old. So she was, my mom is not someone to go up against. She went to the administrators and said, if she is qualified to be in college, her age should not be a problem. So I started college at 15 and I left early at 18, then had to go into the workforce. And I went and I worked for what was at the time our national carrier in Jamaica, Air Jamaica. So I worked with got into the airline industry because even though my first degree was in financial accounting, I decided I could not spend one day doing that job. So I went into a job that was available to me and something that I really liked. I could work with people on a daily basis. So I went and worked with Air Jamaica and I was there with them for 7 years, got a chance to work at the airport. So I'm really very empathetic to airport staff to this day because I know what happens behind the scenes. And I worked there and worked my way up into management. And then I wanted more. So I decided I wanted to go to FIU because I knew they had a great hospitality management program. So while I was in Jamaica, I knew of FIU and their hospitality management program.
That is incredible.
I quit my job. Everyone thought I was crazy. Because now I was a young up and coming manager at a major airport and I decided I was going to quit my job. And I didn't have anything else except an opportunity to go to school. I didn't even have the full tuition. So that was me, really stepping out on faith and taking that risk. And I came to FIU, and in my first semester at FIU, I remember sitting in a law class and my professor said, there is this company that is looking for interns. We do a lot of work with this company. It's called Southern Wine and Spirits at the time, right? And it clicked up, it rang a bell because every time I would walk into the building, I saw this, hallway with wines. I'm like, this is so random. This school has some wine bottles, in a little lobby area. So random. But it had the name of the company on the wall. So that's how I got introduced to Southern Wine and Spirits, just by walking in the lobby and seeing the wines. And, I went to my dean and said, I'm interested in that internship. And, reality was I went from being someone who was accustomed to a paycheck to now being a student and not having a paycheck. And I heard it was going to be a paid internship. So I didn't care where this place was. I was looking for a paycheck. So, I interviewed with the dean of the hospitality management program at the time. And then he sent me over to Southern to do an interview. And I will tell you ladies this, that I had nothing to wear to this interview. And I knew I was going to go to the interview. I mean, my idea was, to leave Jamaica and come to school. So I didn't bring anything that was work related. And having worked at the airline, I had full uniform 24/7. I wasn't walking around with a suit, So I didn't have that available. So I knew I was going to go to this interview and I had to dress the part. So I remember going to JCPenney, getting a suit, I also got pantyhose, right? Because of my airline background where you're required to wear pantyhose, I went to the interview with everything, brand new shoes, brand new suit, everything. And I went to the interview and the person who was interviewing me was at the time and still is Lee Schrager. So I had the pleasure of meeting Lee and I walked into the interview and he interviewed me. And years later, he said, no, not even years later, a couple months later, he said to me, I came to that interview as if I was going to be the executive at Southern. I was interviewing for an executive role, not an intern. Needless to say, I left that interview and I went back to JCPenney and returned the suit. The only thing I didn't return was the pantyhose because that would not have been right. But I was determined to get this job. And he hired me and I was his intern. And he was new to Southern at the time. He had just started Southern in January and I came in and as an intern in August. So, he had big plans and big visions and that would have supported the university. And he wanted someone to help him, have those plans come to life slowly but surely. I mean, we all know the rest of the story, right? He's a mastermind behind the Food Network South Beach Wine and Food Festival. And, that was at the beginning of the time he wanted to work on what was then called the Florida Extravaganza, which eventually evolved into a major festival. So I started my journey with him, as an intern for 2 years while finishing up my degree at FIU. And I went from making cold calls to, wineries and sponsors for this, event that he was looking to put on. I literally remember licking envelopes, and multiple paper cuts, cold calls and people hanging up on me. We're calling about what event? We're not interested. So that was my time. And when I graduated from FIU, I was during my commencement ceremony, Lee was also being honored by the university for his philanthropic, his support of community events, which we all know he's very, very generous. And during my commencement ceremony, he was receiving that award on stage and he was asked to make a speech. And during that speech, he spoke about an intern that was currently working for him. And he said, really want to congratulate her because she's in the audience. She's now receiving her degree. And would she stand? And he said, Kimberly, would you kindly stand? And of course, this is in the main auditorium at FIU, thousands of people. Lee Schrager, being typical Lee Schrager, puts me on the spot, makes me stand. And then he said, I'd like to thank you for all that you have done as my intern. And I'd like to offer you a job at Southern Wine and Spirits full time. So that's how I got my job offer to work at Southern, ladies.
Can we pause right there? Because that's a dream. I mean, I've got a daughter in college right now. I can only hope that somebody, would give her an interview sometime after she graduates. But to have somebody offer you a job on the state, I mean, that's a dream.
So iconic. So iconic. I mean, that is amazing. I can just picture it.
Yes. And then he said, don't be late.
Yeah. Don't be late. You start tomorrow at 9.
Start tomorrow, don't be late. So that's how I got introduced to the beverage management space. I would always say I've always had a career in hospitality management, because when I look back at my career, I did an exercise called journey mapping. I don't know if you ladies are familiar with it. And I really wanted to know what's the consistent path that I've been on all throughout my life, not intentionally, but just happens to, the ebbs and flow of life where, it brings me. And when I go back, I realized I started in the airline industry. I did that for 7 years. I stepped into the beverage management space unknowingly, realizing the connection. But in between, I also worked at hotels. I also worked at restaurants. And I think the only thing I never did was, cruise line. But I've always been in that travel and tourism, hospitality management space. And really, it just all ties together, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm. I think we've all kind of found ourselves stumbling and, onto this industry that just touches so many people and is really built around service and hospitality. And if that's what drives you and it makes you feel good, you're just kind of stuck in it. And there's so many different ways that you can show up. And, I don't want to age anybody, but I do want to put this all into perspective because our listeners might not know, but you are one of the OGs at Southern, because when I started with the company 14 years ago, we were all working out of the Miami Gardens office, and I was a sales consultant, and you were with the trade marketing team. Tell us about that. I mean, first, when you were helping Lee and working for Lee as an intern as he was developing what we now know as the South Beach Wine and Food Festival, that was quite a bit ago.
Yes, it was. So, again, without aging myself, because I can't really believe it's been this amount of time I've been with Southern.
Well, you did start super young. I mean, you probably weren't even 21 yet when you got, they definitely made an exception.
Benjamin Button over here. It's officially around 22 years full time. So my internship didn't count, obviously. But once I got into a full-time space with Southern, I worked with Lee directly for 7 years, and I worked with him on all of our corporate special events. So whether it's trade shows, executive meetings and events, and also festivals that he was working on and being involved in. So I worked with that special events team for a good 7 years. And then I decided again, I wanted to learn more about the company. I wanted to know not just, how we spend money, because doing events, you're constantly spending the company's money. That's just the reality of it. It's promoting the company, promoting our brands. But I want to know how we got business from customers, how, the sales side of the business. And I remember going to Lee and I said, I just want to know more. I really want to know what drives the company, the other side. Mm-hmm. And there was an opportunity to step into, at the time, it was a South Florida market, knowing that our structure has changed tremendously over the past 20 plus years. But I went into the South Florida, as Julie mentioned, that trade development space where, that role was really being responsible for working collaboration with supplier partners on their strategic goals and sales objectives and brand opportunity, pricing strategy, and also working with our sales teams to make sure that they have the tools and resources they need to go out and execute against these strategies. I knew nothing. I knew nothing about that space. And my husband reminds me from time to time when I get, concerned about stepping into a new challenge. He goes, do you remember when you went from special events to the sales side of the business, and you would go into the meetings and I'd come home and I'd say to him, they remember all the pricing. I don't know who can remember all these prices. How do they know all the brand details and the goals? I don't know how they do. And I literally be weeping. And he said, you got this. Mm-hmm. And I would dry my tears, and next day I'm back at the table sitting and behaving like I knew what they were talking about. And not only did I have to step into a role, but I had a team that I had to lead. So it was really very challenging, but I really dug into it because I was just determined. Again, I'm stepping into an area that I know nothing about. But, if you have an ability to learn, we all have the ability to learn. It's just our aptitude and attitude that really this determines whether or not we're going to do it. And that's how I stepped into that role, and eventually got a chance to meet a lot of salespeople like Julie and build connections, right? And help them as they're stepping into their new role. Over the years, a matter of time before you become the subject matter expert. And then you say to yourself, how did I get here? So yes, that was definitely different from what I was accustomed to, but I really leaned into that. And as the years go by, just stepping into different roles with increasing responsibilities.
And then what brought you to the role that you are in today as the VP Supplier Development and Marketing? Because that's certainly so different as well, from where you started, even along your journey learning about sales. Did it just kind of snowball into that VP position? Was it something maybe you were really looking to do? Tell us how, you landed where you are today.
That's a great question. It definitely is a journey. It's not an overnight decision. I don't believe I've ever really targeted a role, and understanding that the company has changed over the years. What got me here was many things, right? So yes, I talked about my willingness to step into challenges, but I also had people who were advocating for me and supporting me. Whether it's words of encouragement or it's championing for me, to step into different roles. Because when I was in that role in South Florida, it was South Florida only. Then I elevated and got to a statewide role. So, more area of responsibility, managing different suppliers at different levels. Then I got into, spent some time there in the statewide role, working in the state of Florida, managing various strategic suppliers. And while I was doing that, I had, 3 boys that, that I was taking care of, my 3 children, in addition to, a family life. And then I decided to go to school and do my master's. So I was busy, very, very busy during a couple of years. And then I got elevated into, I had multiple roles in the Florida market. And then I got elevated into the East region for a period of about 2 years, having 2 different roles in the East region before coming across to the SDM team, which is a corporate team for supplier development and marketing. Essentially, it's the same role that I've been in, but increasing capacity. and increasing responsibility, because now I am responsible for a dedicated wine portfolio across 36 markets. So if you think that about the fact that I started in South Florida, a small section of just a tri-county, Broward, Palm Beach, and also Dade, to now 36 states, it's very different. But the core elements are still the same. I'm still negotiating with our supplier partners. I'm still collaborating. I'm still identifying opportunities for brand growth and development. I'm also working on, looking at category trends, what our restaurant business doing, what are retailers doing. Also, how can we provide more tools and resources for our sales teams? So essentially it's the same, but just increasing responsibilities.
Yes, I can relate. I think we've had, similar journeys, but I love, having three amazing boys that are all, young adults now, and then going back and getting your master's degree. I mean, you just, don't stop. I mean, that's so impressive. And I knew that about you. And it's wonderful to hear how it all comes along. And it's no surprise that you started college when you were 15, when I was probably like still not wanting to get rid of my Barbies, but
Yeah, it's just one of those things. I hope to maybe have a PhD one day. It's the first time I've actually said it outside of my family, but
and you've set it on recording. We have this recorded now. I see what you're doing.
People would say I'm crazy, but it's like, why not?
Well, you're a student for life, right? And I think when you have that and you have that hunger to learn and to continue to learn, but I think more importantly, the discipline, right? And you obviously have that. It's like, why not? Just keep going.
Yep. It's funny. I don't even think I do it for the degrees. This may sound very strange. Like my master's diploma is still in the same tube I got it in. It's not even on display. It's in a tube in a drawer. My husband is just like, you're amazing. My mom has given up by now, because she would actually keep all my degrees or certificates or whatever I get, because I would just throw them away, like throw them in a corner. So she would be the keeper of those important documents, as she would call it. Now my husband just tucks it away somewhere for me because he knows I will probably misplace it. So obviously I'm not getting these accolades to be displayed. It's a personal goal. So.
Well, you need them displayed. I'm going to get with your husband, have him send it to me. We're going to get them framed and put them up in your beautiful office that you spend a lot of time in.
True.
So when you came from Jamaica to America, what was that culture change like for you? Because it's definitely different. And did you have a lot of experience coming to the States? I know, a lot of people, especially from the islands, Miami's so close, I'd love to just like hear your perspective on what that kind of culture change was for you.
So it's funny that you say that. I think I had the advantage of traveling here very frequently. I would, for example, take a flight early in the morning. I mean, Miami, the flying time from Miami to Jamaica, for those who don't know, is approximately an hour and a half tops, right? So I would fly from Kingston to Miami on the first flight, land in Miami about 9:00, rent a car and go to the mall. And I would go shopping the entire day and go to the movies, do whatever I want to do with my friends, and then come back on that last flight from Miami to Jamaica. That's how I would view the US, quite frankly. It was go hang out, go to South Beach on a quick whim. Hey, what are you doing tonight? Nothing. You want to go to Miami? Sure, let's go to Miami. And that was it. And it was a fun spot. Your perspective changes when you now have to live here. Mm-hmm. So, it's like when you're on a vacation, I don't know about you ladies, but sometimes I go on vacation and say, oh my gosh, I could live here. Like everywhere I go, I could live here. Mm-hmm. And then you realize it's different on vacation from living here. But when I decided to live here, because I wanted to go to FIU, of course, I was going to be here. My husband at the time, we weren't married then. We were dating. He was living in New York, and I wanted to live in Miami, especially because of its diversity. It felt so similar to Jamaica. I mean, there's such a big Jamaican community here. The diaspora is so, very strong. It doesn't feel that different initially. And I wanted to step into a space that I could feel comfortable. So being in Miami just made sense. The school is here. The community that I'm familiar with is here. Over time, though, you realize the differences. Over time, you realize you can't just show up at someone's home unannounced. I'm like, why do you need to call me and tell me you're coming over? You just stop by. Culturally, that's not done. You need to announce yourself or tell someone you plan to come and visit them. So the cultural differences started to come across very quickly. And I had to adapt. And even the cultural differences in words that I would say, and people would not understand what I'm referring to, even though I'm speaking English, but technically it's what we'd say the Queen's English versus American English. So that was a difference that I had to learn. And, coming from, when we talk about D&I am coming from an island that, really recognizes women in leadership. We have already had a female prime minister years and years ago. We have already, I believe the UN acknowledges the fact that we have a high percentage of women in leadership positions in Jamaica. It's such a norm that I remembered, when I was going through orientation at Southern, when they were talking about the benefits, employment benefits, at the time you did not get paid maternity leave. And I was shocked by that because in Jamaica, it's constitutional for women to be, paid for 2 months. And the third month is then, 50% or whatever the employer decides to pay. So here I am coming into what I believe is such a bigger opportunity, United States of America. And I'm like shocked, like certain things that I was so accustomed to was not a norm. Thankfully, Southern now has a paid maternity leave program, but that was a part of the culture shock. So, we talk about when you're visiting, those are the things that you don't know until you make this your home. And then you start to navigate the differences and you realize, oh, this is different. But you learn and adapt as you go along. And it's just the same as if any of us stepped into a different country, we'd have to learn and adapt, right? So it takes time to go through it.
Yeah, it takes time as an American who grew up here to go through it. We live in a patriarchal society. And for you to say, like, you came from a country where you did see women in leadership that had maternity leave and all those things, and then to come into a country that's really is run by white males historically, with the exception of Barack Obama and, our current vice president. It had to have been shocking. It's shocking for an American who grew up here in a small town in the Midwest. It's still shocking, right? And so I love that you brought that up because I've been with Southern Glazers for 20 years. So I'm right behind you. And I've seen, and thank God, have seen the changes that the company has implemented to keep up with the times and to make it more equitable and more diverse, which we absolutely need. And to get behind something like the podcast that we're on today was huge. I don't believe that it would have happened 20 years ago, but we're doing it today. And so, I like to look forward and not backwards so much. But I would love to throw this over to my co-host because I know that she has a lot to say on the topic as well.
Kimberly, we've talked so much, and you've definitely been a wonderful sounding board for me. And I think it's really important to kind of understand each other's stories and experiences, right? Because we all make assumptions based on, when we meet somebody, what their current role is and what we know of them now, the various diverse places that we all come from, definitely have an impact on our experiences and also what we bring to the table and what we bring to the company. And I think, the world, we're constantly progressing and regressing, right? And I go back to when we first started this podcast, right? Like 200 episodes ago, a few years ago when we were coming out of COVID. And Kimberly, that's when we had all connected and we kind of, we were brainstorming, like, what do we do? How do we change minds, change hearts, or get people to listen to, understand different perspectives? And and at the time, you were like, it's really about sharing and knowing each other's stories, right? And I think that that's been fundamental about Served Up, is listening to everybody's stories. And, I was telling Bridget today, we were kind of going back and forth, is like, I felt like during that time, it was such a turning point for America, right? Like with just all the civil unrest, and it was horrible. But then there was also this like new kind of awakening of like, oh, wow, like we have a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of work to do. And there was a lot of excitement behind it, a lot of companies, everybody just like, yeah, there's a lot of work to do. And then fast forward to today, or just where we were like last month, it was like, it's almost like DEI became a bad word. Like nobody even wants to say it. And I just don't know how that happened, in a couple years when it was like the number one strategic priority and it was always for a good cause, right? It's to have diverse perspectives and experiences, because ultimately that is good for the bottom line. It's a good thing. And we've seen it and we've lived it. And then it just became like another political talking point. And then, it got pushed back. But I mean, I can't help but to share in the last week, I feel reinvigorated. And I told you that, Kimberly, when I was in your office, right? I feel like now, we've got a vice president running for president. And, the first thing like they said was that she was a DE&I hire, right? And I'm like, is that supposed to be a bad thing? Was I a DE&I hire? I'm just curious, like, if we even want to talk about it, but what does that mean to you? Like DE&I, and do you share any of these thoughts that I'm speaking of?
I mean, Julie, for me, it's, going back to Bridget's original question, right? So how was that adjustment? Moving from Jamaica here, coming to the US. And I'll always, I mean, I'm a Jamaican American, right? So I have dual citizenship. With that, because I was born and raised in Jamaica, my foundation is different than for someone who probably came here from Jamaica when they were 2 or 3 or 4. I got to my adult life there. And I remember, even because I lived in Jamaica, I was always here, I felt like I was always comfortable here. And I remember the first time that I realized, I'm going to be very frank as I say this, the first time I realized I was Black, the way an American says Black, was when I was an 18-year-old. I got a job opportunity, again, very random. This is how I obviously operate. I spent my summer on the Jersey Shore, at a small town called Manahawkin, where, it's a small island off the Jersey Shore. There are no buses. People ride their bikes up and down the island, and I got a job in a hotel for the summer. And I was earning good money, and I was living in a house with girls from all over different countries. One was from France, one was from Ireland, Dominican Republic. It was fun. So I like to call myself the original Jersey Shore episode, because we had a blast that summer, all in good, clean fun. But I remember walking on the street one day, and I was walking to maybe a corner store or something, and a car filled with young guys pulled up beside me and called me the N-word. And I didn't know what that meant. I was like, I mean, I knew what it meant, obviously, because I've watched Roots and all these different movies. But remember, I'm coming from Jamaica where we don't have racial division, right? We have white Jamaicans, we have Indian Jamaicans, we have Jews, we have Muslims, we have Hindus, we have Asian, Chinese Jamaican. We have all of these different ethnicities. And we take pride in the fact that we will say we're Jamaican before what we say our race is. Our pride comes from our love of country, not love of complexion or, heritage. Does that make sense to you?
Totally.
Someone will say, I'm a Jamaican. And that's why you'll see someone who looks like you or Bridget, and they'll say and you'd think they're from a different country. And when they start speaking, you then hear an accent and you say, where are you from? And they're like, I'm Jamaican. Because they're Jamaican. Our country's motto is out of many one people, meaning that we all have different heritage and background, but at the end of it all, we're all Jamaicans. So I remember in that moment when I was called the N-word as an 18-year-old on the side of that street and realizing I was alone and it was a car filled with young guys wondering what's going to happen next. And I remember that immense sudden terror. And that was my first introduction to being Black in America. And that has become like a marker that reminds me I am different here. I may not be different elsewhere, but I'm different here. And that's why you'll hear like Martin Luther King would say that when he went to Jamaica, he felt accepted. He felt free. We do have colorism. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. In Jamaica, we do have that. Or you may have social differences, right? So you have, upper class, and you have that social structure. But in terms of my skin color, it was never something that I had to be aware of. So for someone to be identified not for who they are as a person, but by the color of their skin or their ethnicity, is finding a way to diminish someone else. Mm-hmm. It's finding a way to, reduce your voice. And it's a power struggle. Mm-hmm. It is nothing else but a power struggle. I am better than you are. And that ultimately it is to really suppress. And and that's why framing DE&I as political agenda or DE&I hire is to make that person feel less than qualified. Mm-hmm. That is the objective. When you say a woman was hired into the position because they need to fill a quota, it's because you want to ignore her qualifications. You want to say that you could have had someone better than that person. So again, it is really about oppression. Mm-hmm. More than anything else. We feel more comfortable hiring someone who is less qualified. And this is not about the company. I'm speaking generally. We would often prefer to hire someone who's less qualified, but looks the part. And this could also be political, looks the part, mm-hmm. than to accept someone who looks differently or thinks differently, because it's not going to make us comfortable. And that's where we have a problem.
Thank you for that explanation. I think it's really important. So many of us cherish the term DEI. It means something. It doesn't mean, less than. And then for those that put it into a position to make someone feel less than, I feel like are no better than those in the late 1800s that started putting up statues from the Civil War throughout the South as a signal to the Black race that they were less than, living in the South. And, I feel like it's the same thing. And so when Julie says that, we go 10 steps forward and 20 steps backwards with those 3 letters in that context that's being used today, is just wrong.
Yeah, it is. I mean, a couple of years ago, I went to, I visited a concentration camp in Munich. And, when I had the opportunity to go to Munich, I said that was the only place I wanted to go. And, it was Dachau. And walking through that concentration camp, walking through and hearing their stories of what the Jews went through. And it wasn't only the Jews, it was anyone who was against the regime. So it was Catholics, it was Jews. But the onus or the priority of the regime was to make them feel, to take away their identity, to diminish them, which is why Jews were all assigned numbers. So that's how you take away someone's voice. And that's how you, and it's amazing to see how quickly we create narratives. And we have to be very, very sensitive towards this. This group thinking, this narrative, especially now in this, age of social media, it is rapid fire. Mm-hmm. Think about how long it took Hitler to create that narrative and to get that, to spread it across in Europe. Think about how quickly it would be today. Mm-hmm. So that's something that we have to be very cognizant of. We have to teach our children critical thinking. Question, why are we thinking that way? Why is the other person doing what they're doing? Question things, because that's how we keep going backwards. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It really is.
Is not you, but, people start normalizing it, right? You normalize, being repressed by now being labeled as a DE&I hire or DE&I this, right? And it starts, that behavior becomes normal and then it becomes accepted and then, it continues to snowball. But I think it's important that we talk about it. And I personally am super stoked, and I think that, we finally have an opportunity. And I feel like there's a lot of excitement around possible change in the near future. And I think that it's something we need, right? And yes, there are people that are uncomfortable, but we know that with being uncomfortable comes growth and change. And I think, boy, do we need it more than ever at this time.
Yeah. And I think regardless of your political preference, right, it's what ultimately we're all looking for is a common goal of, I want to live in a safe environment. I want to, if you do have children, raise children in a safe environment. You want to be accepted. No matter who you are, you want to be accepted. You also want to do the right thing. Everybody has a desire to do the right thing. We may get lost along the way or distracted, but do the right thing by either your company, your family, your moral values. All of those things are important. And we have to come to a space where we don't tear each other down to the point where people literally hate other people from a different political party or view. I may not understand how you're thinking this way very clearly, may not understand, but I still have to work with you. My kids have to go to school with you. I still have to live in a community with you. And lo and behold, if something happens, I'm going to help you. And I would hope you'd help me. Mm-hmm. Right? Because that's a decent thing to do. Let's go back to being humans. Yeah. And the reality is, going back to pride of country not to elevate it above, make it be your God, because that's not the point. It is to really have pride of country. End of the day, we're all Americans. That's what it is. And that's where we need to get to, and just be respectful of other people's opinions. We don't have to all agree. We have rights at this point, rights to go out and vote, exercise your right. This is my one time to say, go out and register to vote. That's right. Exercise your right, right? So if you don't have a voice, if you don't come to the table and do something about it. So again, regardless of what your political leaning is, do what you are entitled to do. I have a 19-year-old. I said, you are 18, you're going to register to vote. That's your obligation. That's your duty as an American. Mm-hmm. You vote based on the facts. You do your own research. Take the time to do your research. And scrolling through Twitter and, not Twitter, X and TikTok is not your research. Spend time, because this is important. It's 4 years, it's 2 years, whatever it is. But go out and exercise your right. You can't complain about something you didn't do anything about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's just incredible advice. I do have one more question. I know we're using up the whole hour, which is absolutely amazing. I feel like we could talk to you all day. And I think that we should have you back on the show, for sure. But can you maybe give some advice, some professional advice for those that are listening that are curious about the beverage industry, that are really thinking about, dipping their toe and maybe searching for a new career?
Definitely. So I have the honor of going back to FIU multiple times throughout the year to go and speak to, students that are about to graduate and step into the hospitality management career. My advice is, you have a heart to serve. Obviously, if you don't have a heart to serve, you would not be in the hospitality management space, because in general, the space isn't where you get your salary isn't high in comparison to like if you went to engineering, right? So obviously, say you have a heart for the industry. I would say your network is super critical, and understanding creating a network around you everywhere you are, every step of the way. So if you're in school, get to know your deans, right? Because they have alumni that are connected to the school that they can reach out to and connect you with job opportunities. If you're stepping into the environment of, you're in a restaurant and you never know who you're serving. You never know where your job opportunity, and something I know personally, or my husband and I tell our boys, you never know who's watching. Someone is always watching you, right? Because I know of salespersons who got jobs while they were bartending, while they were serving, and they ended up serving the right person and really serving with excellence. Do whatever you're doing with excellence. And then find those, organizations, USBG, all of the organizations are there. I mean, I think now in this day, technology is just so advanced. We have no excuse. I mean, people nowadays, you can slide into someone's DM and ask them a question and they'll be prone to answering it, right? It's hilarious to me. People have gotten jobs that way. People, we have many success stories of students who got jobs just working as volunteers at the Southeast Random Food Festival. Again, you never know where your next opportunity is going to come. So position yourself and be prepared. Always be prepared to talk about, what you bring to the table. Always be prepared to have your resume updated. You think that those are simple things, but I can tell you it's the simple things that often trip us up. Mm-hmm. Just make sure that you're ready and, do it scared. Do it scared. You never know where the next step would lead you. I would never have thought leaving from an airline industry, I would end up in beverage management. And I always say to students, when you think of beverage management, don't only think I have to be a master som or a mixologist. You can be in finance. You can be in marketing. You can be in IT. You can be these multifaceted opportunities that as we advance, you could be in logistics, supply chain, so many different opportunities in beverage management space that will expose you and that cross-functional, experience to Bridget is in a different space, but I know of Bridget and what she does. And if I want to go spend a day with Bridget as she is working on a project, I can say, Bridget, do you mind if I shadow you for half a day and get to know more about what you're doing? Reach out to people that you want to learn more about their space. Be curious. That's really essentially what it is. And it's applicable across to any industry.
Mm-hmm. I really would love to have you back on Served Up. I think that you are so knowledgeable and wise.
Thank you.
He's a mentor to many, including me. And I love it. Always words of wisdom with Kimberly.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on Served Up. On behalf of the Served Up family, Kimberly, I just want to wish you some great health and a lot of peace Cheers to you.
Thank you. Cheers to you, ladies. Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed our time together.
Thanks for listening. Served Up is brought to you by Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits. Produced by Zunu.online. Music by We Killed the Lion can be found on Spotify. Make sure to subscribe to be notified of future Served Up episodes. Cheers!